All right, so now let's talk more about range function. Remember, with range function, the whole point is to create a sequence, right? And that is mainly used for loops, and especially for loop, that we need to have a sequence. Sometimes you have a sequence, for instance, you have a list or tuple or a string, but sometimes, let's say you want to print out the first 100 numbers, okay, or add them up to each other. You do not have a sequence. You don't want to create that list with like 100 numbers or 1,000 numbers. You just want to very quickly to be able to create those sequences without having any list or tuple or string. To do that, we can use range function. And with range function, we easily can create sequence of numbers, okay, sequence of numbers. And there are three different ways I can use a range function. And I put examples of each one of them and their kind of definition, what each one does. The first one is you only provide the stub value, okay? And I will get into the detail of each one of them. And this is a default way of having a range function. The second one is you provide the start and a stop value. You're simply saying what is the start point and end point of your sequence should be. And then the last one is where you provide the start, end, and the step size of your sequence, okay? So for instance, you want to create numbers from 1 to 100, create a sequence from numbers 1 to 100, and you want jump 5 each time, okay? So you have, let's say, 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on, okay? So you can say, all right, jump 5 each time when you're creating the sequence. So simply put, range can take at most 3 arguments. And the first example that I have shows a range function taking 3 different examples. Let's see that, and then we gradually go back to different ways that we can use range function. All right. So in this one, I am trying to print numbers from 0 to 5 or 0 to 4. And again, for 4, you are creating a variable right here, and then you accessing or assigning different values from a sequence that you have to that variable step by step, like one by one, all right, as you're traversing over that sequence. And Python does it for you. You don't need to take any extra step to traverse over that sequence. When you have a for loop, it is set like that. So you just give the sequence to your for, and you give a variable name, and Python basically goes through that sequence, takes each item, assign it to your variable one by one, and then you have access to different items. Sometimes you have a sequence, sometimes you don't. If you don't have a sequence, you can easily create a sequence of integer values using a range function. In this example, I want to start from value 0. I want to create a sequence that starts from 0 and it goes all the way to 4, right? So the stub value is not included, okay? So a start is included in the sequence that you create. The end value, the stop value, is not included, all right? So if you want to go to 5, then you need to put 6 here. If you want to go to 4, then you need to put 5, all right? And then the last value gives the step size, all right? So it says, what is the step if you want to jump any numbers when you're creating that sequence. And I will show you examples of that. So let's run this. So I expect with this one, I get 0 to 4 with the steps of 1. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So here we go. So correct, all right? So now let's try going 0 to 20 and then taking a steps of 5, all right? So that means my first number is going to be 0. All right, so I get 0 and then I jump 5. That means I'm adding 5 to my current value. So 0, if I add 5 to it, I should get 5, right? I print that because I use instruction, and then I add 5 to it again. So you're simply going and jumping steps of 5. All right, so let's run it. So I should get 0, 5, 10, and 15. And remember, 20, the step value is not included. If I want to see 20 as well, I need to go one more, or in this case you can even go like to 24 because it's not going to be included and it is less than your step size. But to just make it easier to understand, go one more than the value that you want to be included in my sequence. Okay, so now if I run it, I should see 20 as well. Okay, so this is when you pass 3 different arguments to your range function. So the first one is always your start value, the second is your stop value, and the last one is your step. All right, if you want, you can even go reverse. So if I want to print numbers 20 to 0, then I need to go 1 less than 0, and then I can take negative a step. If I take positive a step, I'm not going to get any output because I'm saying, okay, I have my start value is 20 and I want to add plus 5 to it. That becomes 25, and 25 is bigger than your stop value, so you already stopped, so you cannot do anything. But if you want to go from 20 to -1, you need to take negative steps to do that. All right, there is no logical way getting from positive 20 to 0 taking positive steps. Okay, so you go in the wrong direction. If you want to go from 20 to 0, you need to go in a negative direction. So that is why I'm taking negative steps here. So if I do that now, I should get 20, and then it sort of you going down and you get to 0. You could have any steps, it doesn't matter. Okay, so if I go, for instance, from 0, or in one of your labs, I want you to go from 100, I think, to 200. That means if you want to include 200, then you need to go one more. All right, and I want you to take steps of 2 because I want you to only add positive, or actually even numbers to each other. So that means 100, 102, 104, and that simply means taking steps of 2 when you start from 100. Okay, so if I do that, I should see all of the numbers from 100 to 200, right? So in this case, I'm just printing them, but in the lab, I want you to add those numbers to each other. Okay, so you simply need to create a variable such as total and then add all of those i's to the total that you have. Okay, so you have like empty bucket that you start with, and whatever I it is, you're going to add it to your total, to that bucket. All right. All right, so this is when you have all 3 values. Sometimes you just provide the start and stop value. So I can say from 0 to 5, that means 0 all the way to 5, not including 5. All right. So if you have something like that, and if you don't include the step size, by default, the step is going to be 1. Okay, so if you do not include the step, the default value for it is going to be 1. So Python basically says, okay, the step size is not included, assume user meant 1. Okay, and it takes 1 as the step size. So 1 is the default value if we do not include the step size. You can also leave out the start point. You can just go with 1 argument for your range function. All right, and that means you only have the stop value. So by default, your start value is set to 0 and your step is set to 1. All All right, so you start from 0, it goes all the way to 5, not including 5 with the default step size of 1. All right, so if I run it, again, it will start from 0 to 4. Okay, so that was like a short kind of description about range function. In the labs, I have like some of the problems require you to use range function to be able to write that piece of code, especially in lab 8, I think, or lab 9, which is very similar to the previous lab that we had. But instead of using while loop, you are going to use for loop for that. And to create those sequences, you need to use a range function. So you can use either one of these kind of ways of using range function, either have 3 values, 2 or 1, depending on the problem that you have in hand. All right, so I see you shortly for the next video.